to further explore the alarming rates of teenage pregnancy in the Eastern Cape and how those responsible can be held accountable. We are now joined by Dr. Joan Van Niekerk, who is a child rights activist. A very good afternoon to you, Doc. Thanks very much for your time. 4,000 girls aged between 10 and 19 gave birth at public health care facilities alone just in the past 4 months.
Indeed, we should be very, very concerned. And that does not count the termination of pregnancies, some of which I'm sure placed some of these girls' lives at great risk. And births that may have actually happened with assistance at home. We should be very, very concerned because I think it has an incredible impact on our society as a whole. These young girls often remove themselves from the educational system, and although our school policies on teenage pregnancy says that children should return to school, often this does not happen because who looks after the baby? But over and above that, we should be very concerned also about the pressure that teenage girls are put under to be sexually active with their boyfriends, often without contraception. And it's not just the girls themselves, it's their babies that are being parented by children, which is inappropriate. But also, if they are not using appropriate contraception like condoms, they also lay themselves open to sexually transmitted infections and HIV and AIDS. So we should be very concerned.
What forms does this pressure take, Doc, and from who in the main?
Well, it's very difficult to say. We need to have more research on the fathers of these babies. We don't know enough about the fathers of these babies. Surely some of them are peers who sometimes will say to a girl, "You don't love me if you don't have sex with me." And there's pressure from that point of view. And like anybody, girls, especially teenage girls, want to feel loved and appreciated by their partners. Sometimes, though, the pressure is coming from older men in the community who are possibly feeding the family, buying presents, blessers in the kind of colloquial sense. And we need to have a lot more research on who these young men or older men are and what the pressures are that girls themselves feel that they are under. One of our problems is that we approach this problem with a very critical eye. And that makes many of these young girls very scared to talk to us. Also, if the abuse is being perpetrated by someone who has threatened them with violence or their family with violence, that puts the child in a very, very difficult position. However, when it comes to pregnancy and either an aborted pregnancy or a live birth, we have irrefutable evidence of the paternity of that child, because that fetus can be tested for paternity and so can the live child as well. And so we do need to look at who are the men or boys in this young girl's lives. What should we be saying to young men and older men about the appreciation of the teenage girl's life and her right to schooling, her right to health? Because let's face it, a child who is not fully biologically mature in terms of growth, her whole life, her whole well-being could be put at risk from a pregnancy. A 10-year-old who is pregnant is a 10-year-old whose life is potentially at risk.
Now, we may have done a lot of work as a country in the area of HIV and AIDS and the fight against that. But one would have thought that given our history, I mean, to be talking of a need to still do research at this point, isn't that a bit of an indictment on the authorities, but maybe on the rest of us as well?
Yes, I do think it's an indictment on the authorities and also on donors. Now, the reason I'm saying this, particularly in relation to HIV and violence against women, we unfortunately have failed to look at violence against boys and boys who grow up with violence. And I'm not going to, by any chance, say that all boys who grow up with violence will perpetrate violence, but there certainly is a circularity across generations when it comes to violence against girls and women. We need to be looking at the boy child and raising the boy child to accept violence is not acceptable in any context whatsoever, physical, sexual, emotional, and that their responsibility as young men is to make sure that they are sexually responsible and do not use their superior strength to persuade girls or force girls into sexual relationships. So if we look at donors like PEPFAR and donors like the Global Fund, we've got to say to them, take more notice of boys. We also neglect the boy child who is a victim. When we look at boy children across many of our programs that are receiving a little bit of funding, it looks upon the boy child as a potential abuser. But we don't look at boy children as possible victims, either with a history of victimization or potential victimization as they grow up into their teenage years. We see boys as potential perpetrators, and this is wrong. If we understand the vulnerability of boys and men and young men, and we look at equality across the genders in terms of protecting children who have been victims, reaching out to them, providing programs for them, we limit the possibility of that violence across generations. This is a societal issue, it's a funding issue, and it is a programmatic and strategic issue that we need to attend to. The other thing I want to say is the violence against girl children and their pregnancy is not the problem of the Department of Basic Education. It's not the problem of the Department of Health. It's not the problem of social development. It is a problem for all of us to attend to. Traditional leaders, traditional healers, health, education, social development, all of us, police, justice, all of us need to work together to address this problem and to see it holistically. It's part of a relationship that obviously has gone wrong. So we need to look at the girl who is pregnant, the boy who could potentially father a pregnancy or has fathered a pregnancy, the man who's exploited a girl child, the education department, the health department. What are we doing as a collective?
Dr. Van Niekerk, I'm sure a lot of our viewers agree with you wholeheartedly on this one. We have a crisis indeed in our hands. If 4,000 girls aged between 10 and 19 gave birth at public health care facilities in the past 4 months alone in one province, I had to think of what is happening in the other. Mind you, the Eastern Cape, is ranked third in teenage pregnancies after KwaZulu-Natal and Limpopo. We do indeed have a crisis in our hands. Thank you very much for your time and insights. I hope people out there are indeed listening.